Welcome, bold Americans, critical thinkers, worldwide, lovable fuzzballs at the Chris Michaels Show. Greg Bolden here and Chris Michaels for another great interview night. And Michaels, I'm excited about our guest tonight because this is a person who's really had an impact in the political structure of the Republican Party and has seen the light, from the way I can tell from the articles I'm reading, and seen the light the way that I've seen the light. That we've become way too polarized, that the Republican Party, the way we used to define it, is dead for all intents and purposes. I think that our guest is going to agree with that. And that the Democrat Party is not the answer either, that we have a real vacuum right now. And as you and I have discussed, majority of people don't identify with these parties anymore. They really identify as independent. So our guest work, I think, is going to be excellent to talk through to figure that out. What are you excited for?
Well, I think this would be a fantastic study on what has happened to the grassroots movements in the Republican Party and how they have been potentially hijacked through black and white mindsets. So it's either yes or no. And if not, then you're out. So very, very interesting.
All right, well, let's get them introduced. Ladies and gentlemen, today we are joined by a political strategist, a thought leader, who has spent years, as I said, shaping the heart of America's ideological battlegrounds. But this individual is now forging a new path forward for the future of United States politics. His name, Adam Brandon. Now, Adam was formerly the president of FreedomWorks, which was really a key cog in the wheel of advancing the Tea Party's message that I was behind about limited government, fiscal responsibility. Remember those days, ladies and gentlemen? It seems like they're far behind us. In recent years, the political landscape has shifted, and we have this two-party system that's growing increasingly polarized. And Adam has seen this disconnect, especially among younger voters, among the independent voters who are speaking kind of the way I speak. I feel politically homeless, and perhaps you do too. So now he's serving as the senior advisor to the Independent Center. And Adam is leading these efforts to organize what would be a viable independent political movement, one that would be grounded in common sense solutions, pragmatic policies, and cross-partisan collaboration. So he wants to focus on, from what I know, we'll get into this, really empowering what could be the largest and fastest growing segment of our electorate now, independents. So this mission is to really help elect some centrist candidates who can break through this gridlock we have going in down in DC and try to restore, if possible, trust in governance. I'm not sure that's possible. We'll ask Adam those questions tonight. So from data-driven outreach to grassroots mobilization and a keen eye right now on the 2028 election, Adam Brandon is not just imagining a post-partisan future, he's actively starting to build that right in front of us. So, Adam, welcome to the show.
Well, Greg, I appreciate that intro. I'm all fired up, about ready to run through a wall right now. And I thought it was kind of funny, right before I got on this, it's kind of cold here in my house all of a sudden, so I grabbed the first sweater, and sure enough, I'm wearing an old FreedomWorks. And like, as soon as you said that, I'm kind of thinking, I should have got my new IC swag on instead of wearing the old sweater. So
it's good to remember your roots, right? Like
I guess so, right?
So I mean, FreedomWorks eventually got labeled, I think, as a far right organization, and I don't think that you guys deserved the title, but definitely the people that were starting to align did, which was doing you no service. So I'm wondering, is that just me from an outsider standpoint recognizing that, or when did you know it was time to move on?
I took a few notes from your intros there because some of the things I wanted to reflect on, first of all, when you said a movement, that's absolutely what I'm looking at in America today, is that to solve a lot of our problems, parties can't do it. You're going to need a social movement. When you study what actually drives change in America, civil rights movement, the women's suffragette movement, the abolitionist movement, and even those jerks over in the prohibition movement made a change for a while. But I just got to say, it's like I see that happening today. And you mentioned my experience with the Tea Party. Remember, the Tea Party at the very beginning was nonpartisan. It was the first origins was pissed off at George W. Bush and the TARP bailouts, things like that. And then it morphed into anger at President Obama. And then what happened, and I remember exactly when this happened, it was something called Tea Party Express. And Sarah Palin jumped on the bandwagon for Tea Party Express. And then it became not a movement about trying to drive change on spending inside the government. It became a movement about how can we get Republicans elected. And that was the moment the Tea Party moved from being something very special, something that actually had the legitimacy of driving social change, to, hey, we're just trying to get Republicans elected. And I kind of stuck around hoping that we could drive some of that, that limited government side of things. But I watched as the time went on, the Tea Party activists that we first met, they're gone. And I even had to explain this to folks. They're dying out, literally. A lot of those people I worked with, they were in their 60s and 70s, and now they're in their 80s, and they're not involved as much as they were. And so when the MAGA movement came in, bless them, but I think they lost that focus on limited government. It became this kind of hellscape of partisanship. It just got worse and worse and worse. And it wasn't about issues and ideas anymore. It was just that those guys are really, really bad. And my guys are bad, but they're really, really bad. This negative partisanship. And frankly, I think we're heading to a crisis in the next probably 5 years on spending. And this is one of those chances that it's time to get it back under control right now. Or if we go over the cliff, we're talking about a different type of politics in America. So we got to get in front of that.
You are much more optimistic than I am. 5 years? I mean, in my mind, when you're $37 trillion in debt on the national deficit, and you have a bill that's called the Big Beautiful Bill that already is being projected to add billions of dollars in addition onto that debt, trillions, not billions.
I was about to say,
trillions. I've got to add a zero. That's very important there. We are heading in the wrong direction. In fact, I watched kind of with my eyes really aghast at the Libertarian Convention when they invited Donald Trump to the Libertarian Party's convention in DC. And Trump basically told everybody, you have no shot. You need to elect me, and I will adapt, and I will bring in all these libertarian principles. And I got to be honest, I felt like I had only one choice this election. I couldn't vote for Kamala Harris. Right. I couldn't support the libertarian candidates, even though I love Mike Termott. He's been on the show multiple times. Great guy, but they elected Chase Oliver, who does not align with the libertarian branch whatsoever, and I couldn't pull that lever for him. So I voted for Donald Trump, and I told my listening audience why I felt that Trump would be the best. Since he's gotten in office, I feel like I got completely bamboozled. It's nowhere near the very first term that he had. We are now seeing this progressive agenda on spending and really giving away our rights with AI yesterday and so many other things. Like, we are lost. We are completely lost. So what do we do?
Let's go back to those early Tea Party days. I remember our activist base was really upset on the unconstitutionality of 25 executive orders. And we were all hot and bothered, like, you can't govern this way. And now we're just printing them out day by day, basically. We're governing through these executive orders, which I think my biggest concern right now as an American citizen, and I got 2 little kids running around this house, so I'm invested in the future too. We are on track to, I think, what may have been our destiny all along. This was when you go back to the founders, when you have Benjamin Franklin, this is a republic if you can keep it. What's generally happened in American democracies, North and South America, is that they devolve into this 2-party, 2 blood sport for the politician, for the presidency, where every 4 years you have this incredible fight, and then it's the spoils system. Your party wins. You take all your goodies, you try and dish them out to your friends. The other side gets in, you strip the state before you leave office. Then the other side gets in, then they put you in prison. It becomes this cycle, and it becomes this very volatile system where we move between far left, far right. And that republic that was supposed to be stable, one of my heroes in life, the founder of the Cato Institute, Ed Crane, I'm pretty close with him. We have a book coming out this fall. But he always said to me, Adam, when election night happens, we shouldn't worry about the result. It shouldn't matter, because you should go to bed knowing you're protected, but your liberty is protected by the Constitution. But if the parties aren't going to protect your liberty anymore, and they're going to kind of not use the Constitution, if I was telling my family that is really into Trump right now, I'm like, look, you're big Second Amendment people, but you start picking away at other parts of the Constitution, you start getting away With the Fifth Amendment on due process, the Second Amendment's just a sitting duck at that point. And thank God you brought up this concept of what we're doing right now with AI. I think AI is both a gift and also something very dangerous. But when we just start building government databases of AI, like, whoa, slow your roll. What are these going to be used for? I think one of my big concerns is the government gets too efficient. Are these government databases going to start talking to different databases across the government, from the IRS to this department to this department? You have to be concerned about that. And my big fear, one of the reasons I've always been pretty partial to the libertarian side of things, is I'm very nervous about big government or big business consolidating in certain areas. Wherever you have concentrations of power, what our founders gave us was this incredible system of checks and balances. So we need to restore those checks and balances. But to get back to the big change in my life, is that what I see right now is that independent voter in America, and I know we're going to talk about this, 43%, at minimum 40% of the American electorate, when we've been studying them, their biggest beliefs tend to be very moderate on social issues, meaning live and let live. What you do in your own house is consenting adults. None of my damn business. None of the government's business. None of anyone else's business what you do behind closed doors. And then on the more choices. They want to see more choices in healthcare and education and everything. And so when you're looking at the independent Americans are looking for live and let live on social issues and more choices in economics, to me, that is closer to libertarianism than anything the two parties are pushing today. And so I see that as our ultimate salvation. And going back to this point of when we hit this crisis, I kind of do feel like Chicken Little. I've been warning about the debt and deficit for a long time. But what's going to happen in 7 years is that's when the Social Security Trust Fund goes bankrupt. And then you're going to have to start adding on another $300-400 billion a year in spending. And so we're going to take our deficit from $2.5 trillion to $2.5-3 trillion. And that's when I think the international bond market's going to start saying, whoa, wait a second, what's your plan to pay for this stuff? And as multiple congressmen have told me, the US government can function on sub 5% interest rates. When you cross over 5, it gets really tough. When you get to 5.5% on interest rates, it gets really, really tough to fund the federal government. But when you get up to 6%, guys, we're in trouble. There really isn't a plan to fund the government when you hit 6%, which means probably they're going to start just printing money.
Well, they could be printing money, or I know Chris has talked about this as well on his show. What's the odds that Donald Trump right now is setting up with all these tech billionaires to get cryptocurrency and to try to bring in the blockchain necessary to replace the world's currency with blockchain, and therefore effectively erasing America's debt in the future and leading the way? I see that as a possible political strategy that I don't want to say no to, because it could fix the debt. The problem about the blockchain is you will no longer have freedom in purchase. Everything that you're ever going to purchase once you're in a blockchain, and for many ways, if you're using a Visa, I've covered this in shows before, it's already tracked. We got to be prepared that you're going to lose your freedom of commerce if Trump and this administration moves that direction, but that could stave off what you're talking about in the future. Maybe,
but I think you're talking about rewriting basic rules of economics, and there's a lot of people out there that are holding close to, we're $37 trillion in debt. At some way, you're going to have to pay that. And the way that economics generally works is that you can borrow, but that borrowing is based on future productivity of your country. And the United States is an incredibly productive place, but as you start seeing interest rates go up, you're starting, there's a certain effect that has. If the government needs 4 or 5% to sell its debt, there's no way you're going to be able to get your house mortgage under 7%. Like, the government's always going to get a slightly better deal than you are. And that has knock-on effects across the economy. So look, I think we have abilities to get ahead of a lot of these things. There's ways that you can do this. There's transitions that can happen. You're going to have to rethink how you do Social Security and Medicare. I think we're at a tremendous age of technological innovation, which should help with all of this, but you have to usher those eras in. And right now, I just don't see very much happening that is going to make that a reality. The good news is these independent voters who are underage, they're young by Washington standards, under 45, under 50, They look at the world very differently than baby boomers. And we're looking at that's what the main drive is. It's not actually the biggest divisions in society, data-wise, are not between right and left. It's between baby boomer and millennial. And just a completely different way of looking at the world and a completely different way of engaging with people. And again, I always point out millennials have grown up where they get to choose between 50 different types of peanut butter. You want sriracha in your peanut butter? Boom, you can have it. I grew up, I'm 47 years old. I grew up with Skip and I grew up with Jiffy. I grew up with Coke. I grew up with Pepsi. I grew up with generally a couple of choices. So younger voters, though, they just look at the political landscape and are like, are you crazy? I have to choose between two parties? Like, no, thank you.
Yeah, you and I we're the same age. Michael's is the youngin' in the room. He's a little younger than us. Not much, but he's a little younger. I'll give him credit on that. Let's get here. So this is the Independent Center website. You can go to independentcenter.org. This is where Adam is part of the team. You can actually see here. We can click on team. You see Laura Forcrum is president, Justin Longo, and Holden. And there's Adam down here as the advisor.
That's right.
There we go. So in your words, what is the core mission of the Independent Center, and how do you believe it does it to distinguish itself from third parties or the past reform movements like the Tea Party?
Great question. So I first have to say legally we have three different organizations: a foundation, a 501c3, a 501c4, and then what's called a hybrid or a super PAC. Just understand when I'm describing what we're going to do, it fits into all three of these buckets, because one thing we anticipate is we're going to be sued quite a bit as we go along this journey. So to make sure we understand, because you don't take on the two-party system and not expect to get a lawsuit or two. But look, first off, we're just trying to build a home for the politically homeless. We believe that a lot of these issues that you just started talking about, like AI, no one's talking about that. We're talking about what I kind of consider some of these more distracting issues. We should be talking about AI, because I think that AI is going to have an impact on our lives somewhere between the invention of the steam engine and the invention of frickin' fire. So we should probably be understanding what we're getting into. And again, it's going to change our lives in a very nice way. It's also going to change our lives potentially where the government's going to be able to see absolutely everything you're doing. We have to be very careful and make sure that we're preserving our rights and liberties while we're getting the benefits of this. So look, politically homeless, we're trying to build a home. But how do we drive change? Ultimately, we want to look at driving some policy changes here. You got to get involved in the political process, hence our PAC. And just to show you how little people are paying attention to the independent movement, you can try and find like Joe Smith for Senate 2050. That URL has been taken a long time ago. No one filed for the independent PAC. I just signed it for it and got it. No one was squatting on it. It was just there. So we now own the independent PAC. That's how few people are actually looking at this movement. But our ultimate, and this is our big sexy idea that is really driving a lot of, getting us a lot of heat and a lot of attention right now, is that if you look at the numbers, chances are Congress for the next foreseeable future is really going to be closely divided, under 10 seats. And even so if Democrats do really well this cycle, they're picking up 5 to 8 seats, meaning your majority is just going to be a handful. And if Republicans run the table on this Texas redistricting thing they're talking about, they're adding 5 seats. So basically you're back to a world where who controls Congress is 3 or 4 seats. Right now, if you had 2 seats, 2 independent seats, you control Congress. How do you do that? You need 218 seats to get the majority. So if each party gets stuck at 215, that's not enough. That's not enough. And so this is ultimately what we've identified as the back door for independents to take power and to shake the system up, is that if you get a few independents, our goal is 5 this election cycle, 5 independents elected to the House of Representatives who do not caucus with either party. That's the important thing. They do not caucus with either party. They stick together and they negotiate with both parties. You end up setting up a coalition, more parliamentary style of government, which then all the things that we want to negotiate in, a return to regular order. There was a question that someone said about trust. I think the reason that trust is falling in America right now is the founders designed the system where your congressman was your vehicle into Washington. Then we've had this bureaucratic explosion. Yeah, right. You have a chance against one of these giant bureaucracies. You don't. You needed your congressman to get involved in there to help out with that. And the way everything is governed right now, we call it something here in DC. The term is the four corners. And the four corners are the Speaker of the House, the Minority Leader of the House, the Majority Leader of the Senate, and the Minority Leader of the Senate. 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats. And when you hear these giant omnibus bills that are 5,000 words long, that's who writes them, those 4 offices. And so remember Republicans saying they're going to return to regular order? Well, regular order said they should have had 12, 13 bills done by now. You know how many they got done? 0. And even though they promised they were going to do it, they didn't even try to, because they knew they were going to do this omnibus. And this omnibus just empowers those 4 people. So 4 people out of basically 535, and takes the House and the Senate run everything. That's why no one trusts our damn system right now. It's not even close to working the way it's supposed to be. But if you punch through and shatter that system by electing 4 or 5 independents, you force a negotiation onto who gets to control the House of Representatives. You just broke the whole thing, and you gave our people, you empowered individual members now to start to get involved in the process. And I think things will start to work better that way.
Kind of agree with you on all that, but how do you think you can attract disenfranchised voters? I mean, you said that the millennial group, they're all out there and they're saying, why are there only 2 parties? Which, for all intents and purposes, they act as a single party. So it's the Republicans, as far as I'm concerned, it should be Democrats with an R after their name. There's really no difference between what they do. The rhetoric is the same. And for all intents and purposes, people are becoming not only disenfranchised with voting, but the whole political process. Look at the Trojan horse presidency that we're currently experiencing. Greg can validate this. I called this out before the election. I said, are we really looking at another Donald Trump, or are we looking at a Trojan horse presidency?
So look, you mentioned this I can't agree with you enough in the sense that this is the great fear. Look, our founders designed a system where democracy is not a spectator sport. Like, you have to get involved, and if people feel they're not going to get involved, this is what a lot of people want. This is what a lot of people want here in DC, because this is the fight I get in with my mother-in-law every year at Thanksgiving, where she's like, they don't listen. I don't even get involved. I don't even know why I vote. And my fear is that if more and more people take that attitude, well, then just the system, the swamp, whatever you want to call it, completely ends up taking everything over. Like, I've just illustrated how the 4 corners now run everything. And that's a symptom of this breakdown. I mean, all these lobbyists and everyone else who is in on this, they like this current system as it is, right? They understand it. As I've had a conversation with several lobbyists recently, on some policy questions I had, and why, trying to understand even to a greater extent why American healthcare is so broken. And and one congressman told me this. He's like, Congress really, it's just a protection racket now. The big interests get in here and they try and freeze what you have in place right now. And so that's why change is so hard. So going back to what you were just saying about those voters, like, it's easy to get cynical. But if we do get totally cynical, we are going to lose the republic. And that's when people stop participating. So to me, trying to get the independents elected, and it's not 2028 I'm looking at 2026, trying to give some voters at least a chance. But mathematically, how this works is that what we've identified is that there's only about 25 swing districts left in the country. But those swing districts, when we run the math on them, the plurality of the voter in those swing districts are these, what I'll call small L libertarian, classical liberal. We don't even have a name for these people yet, but they're the plurality / majority in these 25 districts. So hypothetically, what we have the opportunity to do is wait for the Republicans and Democrats to beat themselves up in the primaries, because the other trend that I'm watching in American politics, and this is a good trend for us, possibly the most important trend for us, is the value of money in politics is collapsing. With all the money that's flooding into American politics, the value is collapsing. And that is because people don't buy the old rhetoric anymore, and no one's watching TV. No one trusts all the old ways that you used to use political communication. So you have to spend more to reach an audience that increasingly doesn't want to listen to you. So that's why in those 25 districts, you could run very cheap, highly targeted campaigns at these swing voters, of which we've identified in each one of our targeted districts. You only need between 80 and 125,000 votes to win. So you could hypothetically, using AI, using some of the technologies that we've been experimenting with and are already deploying, you can identify those voters in those districts. We go to central casting. We find someone who matches that district perfectly. And here's the best part about those candidates we're recruiting right now. Their lives are better outside of Congress than inside. So the idea is we're asking you, anesthesiologist, person who's a vet, person who owns a car dealership, and their name, all these people that we're engaging with right now to try and run, we're basically saying, just give us one term. Go literally for one term, caucus, vote your conscience, break the two-party system, and you have done so much of a service to your country, you don't need to stick around. So it's like you're going to be able to find better candidates who match these certain districts that only, and be very, very, very clear on trying to answer your question here, this only works in a handful of districts that have plurality of these voters. That said, now I'm going to contradict myself, because one thing that we have seen in data is in some of these districts that are red plus, the most extreme red districts, the most extreme blue districts, believe it or not, we think that those people could actually topple because they've gotten so extreme and so out of touch that there's this growing cohort of people in these districts that just feel that they're not being paid any attention to, that if you give them a choice, they might just take it. And so that's what we're looking to do, is to actually start giving some people. I know you're going to have an independent for governor in California, in Michigan, in Maine. So you're actually going to have some top of the ticket. I know of about 3 serious Senate independents who are running. So in 26, for the first time, some people, not enough, but some people are going to have a choice of independents. I think they get independents elected in 26. That's going to be the, oh my God moment that hits Washington. And then in 28, I think the dam breaks open for independents. That's how close we are, I think, to having a sea change in American politics that we're all going to love to see.
Well, I like what I'm hearing, because I'm part of the group that basically subscribes to, I'm not happy until you're not happy. And unfortunately, a lot of the Democrats and the Republicans are just that. They're never going to change their spots. In some ways, it's good because you know how they're going to act. So you can kind of predict the direction that they're going to go in. Have you folks ever thought about trying to court current Democrats and Republicans? And do you think that's a more efficient way of trying to get more coverage for what you're trying to push?
Yes. The short answer is yes. And I got to be very careful.
Yeah, of course.
I have been in touch with both Republican and Democratic members. And they basically said, why don't you just leave now? Why don't you stop bitching and just leave? And I think a lot of them, one member in particular said to me, and I'm actually taking this as a positive, but you could, if you were going to write the book Profiles in Courage on Capitol Hill members right now, you're going to get your book done pretty fast. So this one member did tell me point blank, he's like, I'm with you. If you get 5 independents elected, I will drop my party affiliation tomorrow, but not until you do that. So, wow. So what happens is that this is the irony of irony. Those members that are in these districts that they should be able to be independent, they still have the R or the D next to their name, and they are completely dependent on leadership for that $25 million a year in campaign funds. So they are completely bought, is the problem. And so to unbuy them, you got to do something more aggressive. Right. And the way that you do that is you show that there's this independent base. This is this new incentive. So remember, but this gets back to what you were saying there, Chris, and this is my big problem. If those people get cynical and don't turn up, we are cooked, I believe. But I don't believe we are. I think when you actually give them a choice, they're going to be like, damn it, I'm taking a third choice. I like this person. This person has integrity, actually. And so then you get them elected. And then once that'll change everything, then I think there will be some folks who are sitting in the middle right now who will finally say, okay, I'm out. I'm joining this. But I think we're going to have to go in and print our own. I'm not going to look at the current crop who are elected today.
Chris, I mean, we have the other problem that you got people like Thomas Massie, who obviously is not taking funds from AIPAC and some other places and calling people out about that. But the majority of the politicians in DC have some type of special interest at this point in time that they're tied to. So you're going to have to find these candidates like the anesthesiologist that you spoke about, or like the car dealer, that can resonate better with people in the trust category. Because I think what we have right now is a failure to trust individuals. I'm going to ask a question that I think needs to be defined for the listening audience. You're talking about independence, almost like a centrist type of category.
Yeah.
When you talk about that, that can mean many things to many different people. It's not concrete, much like people even misunderstand my platform because I tell people I'm a small L libertarian. So how are you defining these beliefs of these people that you're going to find in practical terms? Like, how do you sell America practically on this?
I got to say, you guys are giving me better questions than I usually get. I'm really having a lot of fun. I think you guys are actually getting the seriousness of this project if you're asking questions like that.
Critical thinkers.
But before I get, and remind me, I want to make sure I get to 100% of your question, but I think you mentioned Thomas Massie, and I think we got to go back to him real quick. I think it's important. Why? What is different about Massie? And there's a couple things. So he's always been a pain in the ass to leadership. He has never joined, he's never joined the House Freedom Caucus, not because he didn't like all the members there. He's always told me, I'm not a joiner. He also knows his district and knows his district so well. He represents that district. And I just want to put a point next to that. And then number two, this is the real tragedy. His wife died recently last year, and he was very, very close with his wife. And she died unexpectedly. And where that's kind of left him personally is he's got wonderful grown kids who are doing great. And he's just in this position, and he's a man who gives 0 Fs at this point. There's nothing you can do to him at this point. He has his beliefs, and he's going to go to work each day, and he's only going to hold himself accountable to himself and to his voters. That's what he's thinking every day. So think of that mindset. That is the type of mindset that we need to go and recruit to get in here.
Adam, I have to just pause you for a quick moment there. I listen to the context of what people say on my show when they're answering questions. You may not have meant to say it this way, but I'm going to ask you, are you speaking with Thomas Massie about this? Because you just said he's always told me in your answer, which tells me that you've had conversations. So,
I have had conversations. He knows what I'm doing, but he's happy where he is. I don't expect him to declare himself an independent anytime soon because he doesn't need to. He doesn't need to. He's not the person I talk to. He's not the chicken guy that I talk to. He is actually very comfortable and happy and he legitimately wants to understand what I'm doing a little bit more to see how we could potentially be working together on stuff. And so that's another great point on this. What is this centerism? Now, this centerism that we are seeing, and we're going to be putting up a lot more about this. We've been researching these things now for about 3 years. The person who I'm working with who's doing a lot of this research, his name is Brett Lloyd. He was Donald Trump's pollster in 2016. He was the first person to call me and tell me Trump was going to win. In 2019, he was the first person to call me and tell me Trump was going to lose. He then told Trump that and was fired about a week later. So what Brett is the most non-ideological pollster I've ever met. He is a guy from Iowa who is just a stats guy. He's a brilliant stats guy. And so what he didn't like in Washington is that you always got the poll you paid for. So if a Republican firm was paying him for a poll, shockingly, the Republican numbers looked better. If the Democrats paying for the poll, shockingly, the Democrats doing better. So he also ran the data shop at the RNC for about a decade. So he understands how you do this data infrastructure. So when he and I started talking about going in this direction, we actually met on a park bench one day when he kind of heard that I was thinking this way, and I heard he was thinking about going independent, and we're both kind of feeling each other out a little bit. And then finally it came out, yeah, I'm thinking about going independent. You? Yeah. Okay. Why don't we do it together? And so he's the one who started helping us with all of this research. And so when we got into what this independent is, the first thing that we saw is when we started talking independence, this is 3 years ago, is they came back and their two highest values were were choice and tolerance. And so choice meant, I want more economic choices, more choices in healthcare, more choices in retirement, more choices in where my kids go to school, more choices in where I could live. And then on tolerance meant, I just want to live and let live with my neighbor. I don't care what my neighbor's religious or sexual orientation is. I may be opposed to it. We could live great together. I'm not going to put my genders on an email. Doesn't make me a bigot. Still support, your single sex marriage. But just I'm not going to do that. And so what we found is that was the first thing that gave us the courage to go forward, is there is an audience that would be receptive to this message. So as we've continued to refine, we're going to be coming out with a study where we're looking at cohesion, where we analyze all three parts, where we self-identified independents, self-identified Republicans, self-identified Democrats. The least cohesive group is self-identified Democrats. This is why they're struggling to figure out how to respond to Trump. The second group is Republicans, but their cohesion is based around loyalty to Trump. The independents, they are the most cohesive group. They agree on 86% of the issues we put in front of them. And so therefore, this centrist, what we were worried about in the beginning is what a moderate would be, is this mushy middle. Would be, I kind of, go along, get along. And my problem with moderates in Washington has been, okay, you get your project, we just throw the bill onto future taxpayers, kumbaya, we have a deal. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about something very different. We're talking about these independents who actually, and I think this is why the age difference is so key. This is a generation that believes they're going to get the bill for everything we're doing right now. So they're pissed off, because they believe they're going to have to pay more, work longer to pay for current retirees on Social Security when they're going to get screwed and not see a dime of this stuff. So they're like, you know what? 76% of millennials say they want to reform Social Security. It's like in the single digits with the baby boomers, which hence my time at FreedomWorks, that was becoming very difficult talking about Social Security and Medicare reform when our own base didn't want to do it. Yet I have this millions of this next generation. And by the way, millennials are going to be the plurality of the electorate for the next 20 frickin' years. So what that means is that they're the ones who are going to be deciding everything. So why are we not talking to them? So I'm hoping that's answering your question on, they have this general, the closest you could say is like a classical liberal belief, but on social issues, they tend to be very socially moderate. On economic issues, they want the smallest, more limited government. That's the future of this bloc. That's what they want to see. And so that's why for someone like me, it's incredibly exciting to work with them.
So I'm assuming you're using, from the conversation earlier, I think I caught that you've used AI a little bit to figure out what does this look like, your polling, your data analytics. I know I'm not sure if Laura is the president or what her exact title is, but she's got a marketing background. Yes. How do you now take these individuals that are going to be labeled by the right and the left, the two parties? I think they're going to be labeled as milquetoast and not strong enough. So how do you convince people that this is not a spoiler, this is not a symbolic protest vote, but rather something that needs to happen in order to fix a broken system?
So this is where we get really dangerous, really, really dangerous. This is where we had an event the other day, and I had ex-Democrats like Joe Manchin at the event. And that's what I think the political class is going to be scared of, is that when you start getting people from both who are, and by the way, I don't care if you're still a Republican or a Democrat, you're welcome. Because what I'm actually, and you might appreciate this, I'm writing a memo right now and I'm calling it Big Tent Libertarianism for some folks. And so I am not looking for purity. And I know there's a lot of libertarians who are going to call me a sellout or whatever. But what I'm looking for right now is like, look, if you're into limiting government and you're into staying out of people's personal lives and you're into protecting civil liberties, you're my friend. You are my friend. And we could do some things together. And so the first thing I just want to say is that what we're actually looking at is that this movement could get lucky and we could get a couple of elections. You could Jesse Ventura this. We're building the infrastructure. That's what didn't happen before. This is that boring thing about, databases and donor files and voter files, all of that stuff that the parties have a monopoly over, and this is why they're not scared. We're actually building it right now. So that's the first thing that is different that will carry this movement on. So it's not just about getting a one-off shot elected one person. It's about building something sustainable. But you're absolutely right on the fact that Laura comes from, our president. We stole her out of Clemson's business school, and so she understands consumer psychology, and that's something I don't understand. But we are approaching this product like our philosophy, like it's a new Ford product. So how do you launch that product? And so we want to understand that we're not just getting out there and saying like, we believe this and we're going to go shout it. We're going to use most cutting edge consumer technologies possible to actually go out and meet these people. Then we're building this infrastructure so that they would have an infrastructure to sustain them. And then this thing about the spoiler, oh man, you just poked me right in the eyeball. And I just want to come and kick you in the shins right now, because there's nothing that pisses me off more than being called a spoiler. Because the only people we're spoiling are the Republican and Democrat partisans. They're the only people that are feeling this. Why? Since when is giving the consumer the choice they want spoiling? I mean,
now you're talking like a libertarian. I love it. This is what I've been saying.
I used to live in Eastern Europe. And, those poor Poles, in communism, they had a choice between a Lada, which was a Russian crappy car, or a Polonaise, which was another Russian crappy car built in Poland. That was your choices, right? That's not a frickin' choice. And I'm being it's so hard to keep my language under control. And I'm proud of myself. But look, we're giving the voter what they want, and I'm the spoiler. This is so frustrating to me. This is what the founders wanted. You want to get people back involved and trusting the system. Give them robust competition. Give them voters candidates they actually are excited about.
Hold on, Adam. If you talk about this, what the founders wanted, we can actually go back to Hamilton, the Federalist, the Anti-Federalist Papers. They called it Anti-Federalist just to do the same game that we're playing now by saying spoiler. They had to put anti on it to make people go, oh, okay, well, you're on that side and this is bad. I mean, this is the same thing 200 years later, still playing out in our political system. The reason why I use spoiler is because you and I both know that the Republican and Democrat Party controls the debate cycles. They control the election laws in every single state. And there's something else that they control that I want to ask you about, because I think it's actually the biggest thing that you're up against. And Chris Michaels, you know exactly where I'm going. How do you attack influencer networks that are vying for millennials and Generation Z? And by the way, I've been trying to get in touch with them. Since you have communications, you need to talk to Thomas Massie about this, because I know he's intimately aware of this. The influencer networks are corrupt to the core within both the parties, as well as having their own agendas. And so how do you plan on either using influencer networks to get your candidates in, or exposing this as part of the corruption that's going on in Washington, D.C.?
Well, I think everyone knows most influencers are paid. And I'm not knocking that. We all got to make a living some way. So that's, and I just appreciate when people at least will come out and say that they're getting paid to do something. But I think if you look at our strategy, we just start touching some of the AI that we're getting into this. One thing that's very interesting, about 9 weeks ago, we had our first sign up that came off of ChatGPT. It is now a third of our traffic. And if trends continue, it'll be half of our traffic. And a lot of what we're starting to see and this is coming from Gronk, from Perplexity, from all these different things. And what's generally happening is people are Googling, how do I become an independent? What is an independent? Or Googling. I don't even know what we call it when we go on AI and do this. I got to find a new word, right? But they go on these sites and they're asking these questions, and that's what they're being driven to us. And so we're trying to follow the algorithms now. Of course, like those algorithms, they're private, they could change and we could get screwed. But I don't see that happening just yet. But what we're going to be able to do is start building a more direct communication with these voters. And so some of the things that we want to do for them is we're creating something called the marketplace of ideas. So we're going to take issues like healthcare, like Social Security, like immigration, like, we're going to pick some really hot button issues. And then you're going to put up, here's the Republican position, here's the Democrat position in their own words, so people can make a choice. And then we're going to put up some facts. And then we're going to try and just give a space for people to make up their own damn minds on things. And so that's one of the ways we want to start engaging and then we're going to have our own solutions, which is based on, we're going to mix a little bit from Republican, a little bit from Democrat, and here's our own special sauce that we want to put in to solve this problem. And I think that by presenting things that way, this is what we're seeing the consumer wants, the voter. That's what they're in. They want to make their own decisions, but they want to have someone that they can trust, and they don't trust the two parties. So we've got a lot of tactics that we're going to be employing like that about talking to people directly. And look, frankly, there's just a lot of people that trust us just because we're independent. And so if you're not Republican and you're not Democrat, that's good enough for them. But the challenge is going to be, I get back to this, when we start moving into politics, identifying these folks, which we're using AI to do, we do the polling to learn things. We then use AI to help us find these folks, to drive those people in with the message that we know they're looking for on these independents. That's why we're still going to need about $2 million per election, not 20, 2. We can do it on 2.
Because you found these districts where they're electable within those.
And then we're going to be able to identify these voters down to like 80,000, 125,000. And by the way, the reason, not to get too far into the weeds, but one of the things we use AI for is we're building the profiles of the districts and building the winning. We come up with, before we're going to get engaged in these districts, we're not going to endorse a candidate until we see a path to victory. And that's how we're going to avoid being a spoiler. Like, if we do what we need to do, there's a high probability we win. We actually then can scrape data off of LinkedIn and match it up with the candidate profiles that we're building. And LinkedIn will actually show us individuals that are like, a person like this matches your, who your candidate is. And that's why I was looking at some data in North Carolina where it spit back that we needed a first generation Indian American anesthesiologist. That's the personality that would win that district. Wow. So then I don't know, I'm not saying we're going to go and find that person, but we could find someone with those same, with that same type of background. By the way, all of our candidates are going to be younger for the most part. They're all going to be under age 50, which is something that also appeals to people, is that they're getting really sick of this old folks home, 80-year-olds who are in nursing homes and still voting in Congress.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. I mean, I think one of the more important aspects of trying to get somebody that you're looking for into one of these seats is to have somebody that is kind of bombastic. They need a big personality. One of the main reasons why people gravitated towards Trump was during that first, or I don't know if it was the first one, but the debate with Hillary Clinton where he said you'd be in jail. Right. Everybody glommed onto that and they just loved it. So I think one of the most important aspects of a potential candidate is to be able to take flack and really dish it out. I mean, I don't think we want somebody that sounds like they're selling KFC like John Neely Kennedy. Every time he speaks, I feel like he's trying to sell me a bucket of chicken and I can't take it, even though he does come out with some good one-liners. So what kind of ideal candidate are you looking for that is just not this milquetoast person, this wishy-washy individual, somebody that, when I used to listen to Rush Limbaugh, he basically said there is a candidate that everyone should have. It's a stick to the issues crowd. We don't need to alienate. We don't need to negotiate. It has to be, I ran on this, I got voted in because of these issues, and I'm going to continue to push for these issues.
So the number one thing, we did a series of town halls in Michigan recently. And it was interesting in the town halls, the way we structured them in these different cities is we would have self-identified independents as half the room, and the other half the room would be self-identified Republicans, or we'd have half the room as independents and then the other half as self-identified Democrats. And what we found in that is that if you had the Republicans and the Democrats in the room, they would actually start shouting at each other, and the independents would just be like, I'm out of here. When is this over? And when you just had the independents and the Republicans, they actually talked very well together. And the number one thing that we heard that came back from these is they were looking, they both, and this is what shocked us, is even the Republicans and the Democrats were saying they wanted these independent candidates, is that they thought that's the only way you're going to hold the parties accountable. So, Chris, what you were just talking about there is you need someone who's going to be able to get up there and not be able to fill the room and be able to stand up and basically call out both parties for their BS. And I think that there's just ample room to do that. If you just, to me, like, this is one of these, and there are some current members that are pushing legislation like this. This should be a bipartisan thing. You shouldn't be able to trade if you're a member of Congress. Your spouse should not be able, and your children.
Yeah.
This is just
outrageous.
a basic thing. Yeah, because there's no way that Nancy Pelosi is still smarter than everyone on Wall Street when it comes to picking stocks. Like that to me is so. And then then I just see some of these people who retire, and it's like, you have what? $10 million? You've been in Congress and this and that since you were a teenager. How the hell did you assess this? I mean, I don't like throwing around the word corruption. My goodness. That is something that the type of the candidate could get up there and make those accusations that everyone knows is something, to be like, look, I'm going to be the change agent. And what I love about that person getting up there is they're going to force the Republican and the Democrat to be a champion of those issues, even if they don't win. So even just that accountability, that's what I think you're really looking for, is that person who, and I know I'm looking for when we start talking to these candidates, are you going to be able to get in front of a Republican and Democrat and pound at both of them for how their parties and how they're conducting? And by the way, don't let them off by saying, look, I'm a different type of Republican, I'm different from my party. BS. If you've got that by your name, you got to answer for it. And we're going to make it uncomfortable as hell, or at least our candidates are going to.
What I keep bringing up is everyone is ecstatic about every time there is some kind of drop from the Trump administration, whether it's on Russiagate, Ukrainegate, Epstein, whatever. And I keep having to reiterate, they promised us transparency. They did not promise us accountability. So you're getting all of the information, but is anybody going to end up in irons? I doubt it.
Doubt it?
I doubt it. So I agree with you. We need somebody out there. We need maybe a firebrand.
Look, this is something also, and this is something that my family I'll explain how things work, and they'll be like, people should be going to jail for that. And I'll be like, you don't understand. That's actually legal. It's legal. And so even though it's not right or it's immoral, I mean, look, going back to Thomas Massie, how the parties shake these members down for campaign funds. Mm-hmm. So when you get elected and you show up, you're basically given a menu of committee assignments, and they're for sale.
Yep.
They are for sale. There is a number next to them, like Ways and Means, really big number. U.S. Postal Service Committee, really small number. So what the idea is it's not for sale. It's that candidate then needs to go and raise campaign money to kick back to leadership, and that's where that transaction, that sale is. But I mean, when you look at it, it's such a corrupt process, because I've talked with members, because look, I'm going to give you, I actually think most of the members I've met, they come to this town and they are just, they want to change everything. But I think what happens is when they get there, they get sucked into this. Well, I want to get on committee. I need the money. Okay, where's the money? Here's the lobbyists with the money. And next thing you know, you've been bought and sold before you even swore into office. We're sworn in. And so that's part of the heart of the challenge that we need to get in. And with these independents who can actually get in there and say, look, I'm not even going to try and get on a committee. You don't need to be on a committee to pass legislation. You don't need to be. That is one of those constructs the parties have set up to try and to break this, to change the system in their favor. So these are the different things. We have a lot of obstacles, but breaking the committee system and the pay for play on committee system is one of the big ones.
Yeah, I mean, I hate the fact that at this point, too, in American politics, if you're not introducing legislation, you're seen as ineffective. If you're not on the committee, then you're not contributing. When the reality is the founding fathers wanted us only to meet once a year for the good of the country. They had no intents and purposes of us staying weeks at a time to pass bills. To me, it's a bunch of people that just want to seem important, to say they got something done, but it's all just continue to constrict everything. So my question is this. Mm-hmm. We've got a lot of great info from you, but I want to kind of reel this into a centralized, I'm going to give you a multi-pronged question. What are the central issues that you've identified that are going to matter to these voters, that people are going to band behind? Mm-hmm. As part of that, of those issues, success in 2026, 2028, does that look like having your goal of being influence in that agenda, disruption of the parties, replacement eventually and trending of one of those parties, or maybe getting a presidential candidate in the future. So to land here, in 10 years, what do you hope people say about your work, Adam, and the Independent Center amidst all that? So it's a multi-prong you can make your way through.
Look, so I think that what we're seeing is what the voters are telling us they want more even than the specific issues is they want accountability on the two parties. So you kind of start there. Then when it get down to issue specifics, this is not going to shock you, but the number one issue in most voters' minds all the time is healthcare. That's the number one. And no one is really talking about that. And so we've actually been able to, working with we've been looking overseas, places like Singapore. There are places where you've got markets, but you still have some public support for people. So they're just but you also have the public support is then administered via markets. So you end up having this efficiency, and you still have this competition. So healthcare. We talked about spending. Spending is a huge issue for these folks, but a lot of that spending comes down to, how are you going to put Social Security and Medicare on a long-term track that you're not going to bankrupt us just to pay for some, things today. So those are two big issues. We mentioned some of these good governance issues in Congress, like you can't trade, you got to be, and I think one of the reasons that people will, in Congress want to trade, well, besides they want to get rich, is that if you're going to be, if you want to trade, and you're going to be there for 20 years, well, that's a hard thing to do. But if you're only be there for 2 years, it's not that big of a deal then to take some time off of your financial, just do the basic stuff. So look, we have some opportunities there on different bills that you could pass that would be kind of good governance, cleaning things up. There's structural changes we want to make. Returning to regular order by insisting that there would be certain penalties if budgets aren't passed in time, i.e. you could break the coalition. That will speed things up and empower the committees to do their work, which will empower individual members to be offering amendments, which then if individual members are starting to be able to offer amendments, that means we're starting to restore our republic. And then you're starting to drive that connection back to people. So I hope at the end of this, those biggest, nastiest problems in 5 years, whether they're the spending issues, immigration, all of that, you actually were able to start fixing some things so you could actually show that everything isn't this existential death fight. Like, yeah, we can fix these things and just start to move forward. Then as this goes in the long run, I am aware that both parties are in terminal decline. And so if we have this giant independent network, it could be the bone marrow transplant into either party, maybe both parties. I could see it become evolving like the Republican Party evolved out of the abolitionist movement. I could see that movement evolving. I'm not sure, but I do know what I think would happen is that the goal is that you're actually taking these, for lack of a better word, classical liberal values that have been abandoned by both parties. You mainstream it again, so you're able to drive limited government, responsible legislation, and so that's the ultimate goal here. But does it end up in a party? Maybe, probably. I don't know. But we'll be ready for it. We're not intending to start the Independent Center to be around for 50 years. That's not the goal. The goal is to have an organization for this moment, for this crisis we're entering, and then we'll see where things go from there. I mean, I hope that I could play a big contribution to this, and I hope so many people get involved. It totally gets taken from me, right? And I could be noted as someone who helped start this whole thing, but then this whole legislating through common sense and getting average people back involved in the system, we become irrelevant at that point. I mean, so that's my goal.
It's a good goal. I mean, we definitely have disillusionment. We got gridlock. We have polarization, all those things in our political party right now. So it's a lofty goal, Adam. Very lofty goal.
Here's what I want everyone who's listening to remember. These millennials, look, there's baby boomers who are coming along with this ride too. But primarily this is a millennial, people aged 30 to 40, 45 led phenomenon who are overwhelmingly independent, who overwhelmingly want limited government. They totally support the goals of things like Doge. However, they just didn't like the temperament from Doge. They thought it was ham-ham. They wanted something a little bit more, let's go through and be a little bit more strategic. But it just shows this audience wants that limited government. They want to fix some big things. And this audience, as it rises up, in the next 2 years, it's going to change the entire narrative, which is going to be so refreshing. Now, it's not going to be perfect. It is going to be somewhat messy, but I don't mind messy when you're disrupting a corrupt system, a broken system. And that's what this movement is going to do.
Well, for everybody, you can go to @Adam_Brandon and follow Adam on X. Now, that is our platform we're streaming on right now. Of course, you might have found us on YouTube and Rumble and all those other platforms as well. But that's where we do a lot of our communication. So make sure you go over and give Adam a follow over there. We won't even get into the Cleveland Browns. Adam.
Yeah, it is. As it says here, it is a love-hate relationship, and it is generally on the hate side.
Hopefully you have less candidates than you have quarterbacks.
Oh my goodness! You got to pick at a scab. Like, look, and my wife's a Denver Broncos fan, so we're literally pushing our children to be Broncos fans. And when they start saying things like "Go Browns," it's like, no, I'm failing as a father. Yeah. I'm sucked into this. I can't do anything about it, but I can save my kids.
I have so I live in Delaware, and I have very good friends that had season tickets to the Browns for years. And 2 years ago, he finally became an Eagles fan.
Good for him.
After like 30 plus years as a Browns fan. So there's plenty of room in other tents. Philadelphia Eagles, we'll take you in. I mean, we've got a championship team. You can come this way, Adam. Chris, anything to add?
Yeah, I think we should have Adam on more regularly.
So do I.
Particularly when it comes to election season. I mean, I would expect nothing less from a graduate of the same university as Copernicus.
That's right.
So, I mean, I'm sold. I'm sold.
For your real geeks out there, Charles Menger, one of the founders of Austrian economics, he also was an alum of the Jagiellonian University of Krakow, Poland. So
we could do a show just on Austrian economics. Mike Termott's a good friend of mine. We could bring Mike Termott in to talk. Great. Not sure if you saw, he just joined the Republican Liberty Caucus and left the Libertarian Party behind to try to influence the Republicans, because he, like you, understands that MAGA is not forever, and the identity needs to be established here rather quickly within the next 2 years. Whether you're Democrat, Republican, these problems that are coming at us, it's the classical liberal solutions that history has proven are going to pave the way. And in fact, I was writing something and I had to not write it because it got really too wonky when I was comparing our time today to 1970s Britain. And in the mid 1970s Britain, the energy shortages got so bad, they moved to a 3-day work week to save electric power. I mean, their economy was on its back. They basically had just stopped food rationing from World War II. I mean, it was so bad. They nationalized everything. I mean, it looked worse. I mean, they had an IMF bailout. Thatcher. And then you ended up having a great 30-year run. So I look at a lot of the things, the history is cyclical. And so a lot of the challenges we're getting at right now, whether it's inflation or, a flimsy currency and all the rest of it, like we've dealt with a lot of the stuff before. We know what the solutions are going to be. And I look down at Argentina and what Milei is doing down there. And some people really hate his guts. But one thing I love him so much about is he told people this is going to be rough. And now they're looking at 5% growth rates. Now they're looking at, for the first time ever, having a stable peso down there, stable currency. And it's like, right. I look around the world and it's like, this is a bad situation our country's in, but it's not doomed. There are plenty of solutions to this stuff. There's a base of people that is finally ready to rise up and say, we're not going to let the Republicans and Democrats keep driving us off the edge. So that's why I'm optimistic about the future. Maybe I come back in 5 years and I'll be talking to you guys from New Zealand, polishing my gold and all that because things went really poorly. But I don't know. I do think that this is going to be an incredible resurgent moment in America, and I think it's going to be based on a more limited government philosophy that is going to be championed by the independent movement. Well, if you guys would like to learn more about what Adam's been speaking about this evening with us, you can go to independentcenter.org. I have it directly right up on the page, but if you're listening in audio only format, independent.org, you can join the movement, you can donate. Plenty of information available there. You can learn a lot more, as well as we heard here that they filed for independent PAC. So this is going to be something that's a major player in the future. Adam, we will look to get you back on here in the future as well. Anything that you want to add before we let you go for the evening?
No, but I just wanted to. You got me thinking about the Cleveland Browns. So I'm hoping maybe we.
Oh,
can
don't
come
do that.
On,
That's torture.
Well, I don't know what's worse. My former Cleveland Indians are trading their best players away. So I guess I got basketball in my life. That's it. So if you notice behind me, I still have the Chief Wahoo flying.
Oh, that's awesome.
On my collection. It's that's my childhood you're looking at back there. So.
Well, that's great. Well, Adam, thank you so much for joining us. And we're going to, at the very end here, stick around in the green room. We'll be right with you in just a few moments. All right.
Sounds great.
All right, everybody. That is Adam Brandon, Chris Michaels, Greg Bolden here. Another great interview night. Chris, thanks so much for bringing Adam in too. That was great.
Oh, this is great. Like I said, we need to have him on more often, especially when it comes down to the election seasons.
Yeah, I like
because
common sense.
He is just going to eviscerate
yeah.
all of the polling data, just like I did. Remember last time?
I remember.
30 minutes. I'm going to tell you why this poll is BS. Now Adam is going to take up the helm. He's going to do it in a lot more efficiently, in a more efficient way than I ever could.
Everybody, make sure you're following America Emboldened directly on Rumble, YouTube, wherever you like, Spotify, etc. Check out the Chris Michaels Show, airing on Spotify almost nightly. It's Monday through Thursday, as well as going live on X and all those other platforms as well. And we will see you again very soon. Thank you, everybody, for stopping by, for being bold, critical thinkers. Take care, everybody.